Comparing Beyblade characters to other popular anime/TV show characters. Bit of a random video idea, but it should be very fun. Essentially, we're just going to be taking characters from Beyblade and trying to find similar characters to them from other shows. These similarities can range from appearances, personalities, traits, their specific role within the show, and so much more. Now, this video right here is definitely one where I would need some opinions and input because obviously I haven't seen every single show ever to be able to make the perfect comparison. I'd say I've watched a decent amount of shows, but nothing crazy, I don't think. Like, there are definitely tons of people who have seen way more shows than I have. So if at any point in time throughout this video you feel like you have a better comparison, be sure to comment down below what it is. But without further ado, let's just jump right in. Starting with Gingka Hagane. This one was pretty easy. In fact, I've come up with multiple comparisons. I think the perfect comp for Gingka is Naruto Uzumaki from Naruto. If you've seen both of these shows, you would probably understand. They're both kind of the happy-go-lucky protagonists. They can both be a little goofy at times. They always fight for what's right. They always fight for their friends. There's a ton of similarities here. Also, another comparison for Gingka could be Ash Ketchum from the Pokemon anime for pretty much the same reasons. Goofy, happy, always doing the right thing, that type of vibe. And honestly, you could keep going with these comparisons. I mean, pretty much any 2000s to 2010s shonen protagonist could work here. They all kind of have that same vibe to them. So I've never watched One Piece, but maybe Luffy could be a good comparison. Let me know what you guys think. But yeah, I'd say we came up with some pretty good comparisons for Gingka, so let's move on to Kyoya Tategami. Kyoya is the hardcore, not very friendly rival, but he'll come through when you need him. Now, I will say, for these comparisons, my mind sort of automatically goes to Naruto, because that's one of my favorite shows of all time. So I was thinking, like, maybe Sasuke Uchiha could be a decent comparison, but to be honest, they don't have that much in common. Like, yeah, they're both kind of the grumpy rival, and now that I think about it, they are both set on revenge, but I feel like Sasuke isn't the best comparison to Kyoya, because at one point Sasuke was a legitimate villain, and I guess you could say Kyoya was a bad guy at one point, at the very beginning of the series, but I mean, that was nothing compared to what Sasuke was on, so instead I came up with something else. I think the better comparison for Kyoya is Vegeta from Dragon Ball. Now, I'm not going to lie, I've only watched bits and pieces of Dragon Ball Super, so I'm not fully confident with this comparison, but I do know who Vegeta is. He is the hardcore rival who, correct me if I'm wrong, is always grinding just like Kyoya, and relative to his rival Goku, he's always a little bit weaker. Kind of like Kyoya is to Gingka. And they're both set on getting stronger so they can beat their respective rivals, but they never quite do. To my understanding, at least. So yeah, I think that's a pretty solid comparison. Let me know what you guys think, of course, but let's move on. This next one is a little crazy, so buckle up. Our next character is actually Bakin, and his comparison is Eren Yeager from Attack on Titan. So, just a brief background, Bakin is from the Soul Blaze Metal Fight movie. He wields Dark Poseidon, a very cool Beyblade, he's got a very cool avatar, but let's talk about his story. He basically wanted to revive Atlantis, which was his people's homeland, and in order to accomplish this, he created a cult called the Sunfoot Soldiers, and he used his grandson Helios for his power, and to be honest, the specific details of this movie I've kind of forgotten, so from here on out, we're trusting the Beyblade wiki, but basically, Bakin sets Helios against Gingka, and they have a crazy battle. In the end, Gingka does win. Helios is pretty sad. He apologizes to his grandfather, only for Bakin to not even be upset, because this whole time, Bakin was secretly harvesting the energy released from this crazy battle to power a massive weapon, which he was then going to use to strike an asteroid passing by the Earth, with the intent of changing its course towards the Earth. Bakin's thought process here was to essentially destroy the world and civilization as we know it with this asteroid, and from the rubble, he could then rebuild Atlantis on the surface. But for my Attack on Titan fans out there, you may have already picked up on a few similarities. For starters, Atlantis could be compared to Paradis, which was Eren Yeager's homeland. I'm pretty sure Bakin said that other civilizations destroyed Atlantis because they feared it. And then Attack on Titan, people essentially blocked off Paradis from the rest of the world because they kind of feared the Titans. Then you could also compare Bakin's cult, the Sunfoot Soldiers, to Eren's, I guess, cult of the Jaegerists, and then the premise of both of their plans is pretty similar too. They both wanted to basically kill a ton of people for the sake of their homelands. Now, I'll admit the reasoning and how they went about it is very different, but there are definitely some similarities here. This was a pretty crazy comparison, so let me know if y'all see what I'm seeing. But now let's move on to Ryuga. Ryuga is easily the most popular character from the Metal series, and I'd maybe go as far to say that he's the most popular Beyblade character, period. Maybe that's pushing it, but he is definitely up there. Anyways, his comp was actually pretty difficult because you need someone who is sort of an anti-hero, and you need someone who's essentially the strongest or one of the strongest in their respective verse, and you need someone who acts like that as well. Ryuga very much has a persona of basically being the best, because that's what he was for essentially 99% of the show. So for his comp, you need someone who is considered the strongest of their verse, and you need someone who's like equally confident, if that makes sense. So like a Captain Levi from Attack on Titan, for example, that kind of works. I mean, sure, towards the end of the series, he got nerfed. He's no longer the strongest, but for a majority of the series, for Parody and for the Scouts, he is by far the best, and he has that same type of reputation as Ryuga, kind of. Now, Captain Levi is not a great comparison for Ryuga because of literally everything else, but they do have that one thing in common. So let's actually talk about a semi-decent Ryuga comp, which is actually Prince Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender. Now, stick with me because on face value, you may not see a lot of similarities, and I'll be real, this one is not like a 100% match. None of these comps really are, but let's go season by season because both of these shows have 3 seasons. So, season 1, Zuko and Ryuga are both villains. Zuko wants to capture the Avatar, and Ryuga wants to capture everyone's power, including Jinga's. Then you go through all of season 1, and both of these characters are still flat out villains. Now, fast forward to season 2, and both of these characters change a lot. Ryuga basically becomes an anti-hero who kind of stays in his own lane, and he even helps Jinga more than a couple of times. Then you look at Prince Zuko, who I don't think became an anti-hero, but he definitely did lean more to the good side during this season compared to last season. He frees Appa, which was the huge thing for his character. It was a huge help to Aang, and then Zuko did have his identity crisis because he's becoming a better person, and it's so contradictory to what he's believed for his entire life. There's a lot going on there, but basically throughout seasons 1 and 2, both of these characters have gone from straight up villains to at least a little bit better now. And then you go to season 3, and Ryuga kind of takes a step back, I'm not gonna lie. He's not a villain by any means, but he just doesn't care about anything except for what he wants. Meanwhile, in season 3 of Avatar, Zuko literally becomes a good guy. So this is where the comparison maybe starts to branch off a little bit, although I will say that Ryuga, at the very end of his life, sacrificed himself for the sake of the good guys, so you could say that Ryuga himself became a good guy at the very end. So yeah, not a spot-on comparison, of course, but it's actually pretty cool to think that both of these characters, who I like a lot, have so much more in common than I originally thought. Now, I do have one more comparison for Ryuga, and it's actually another Dragon Ball character, Beerus. Now, once again, I have not seen much Dragon Ball, but from what I can remember, both of these characters are, or at least one point were, considered the strongest among their peers. That's the main point of comparison here, and then there were times where Beerus was bored because of how much stronger he was than everyone else, and there are also scenes of Ryuga battling people, being bored out of his mind, saying that this is all a waste of time. The similarity here is just the superiority these two have over most of the people in their verse. And yeah, I will admit this comparison isn't as good as the Zuko one, but let me know your thoughts, of course. I do think that's all I have for now. Let me know what you guys think about all of these comparisons we made here today. Were you able to come up with something better? Comment it down below. Or if you have comparisons for characters who I didn't mention in this video, like Tsubasa or Masamune, let me know. I thought this video was a ton of fun to make, so I would definitely be down to do a part 2 if I come up with anything else, or if you guys want to give me some good ideas, maybe I could feature them in the next video. But as always, thank you guys so much for watching and supporting the channel. Thank you guys so much for sticking around, and I will see you in the next video.